Folks, what's going on? Zaide here with another episode of DramaQuest. Boy, it's been a long time since I did one of these, so sorry about that. I have been really caught up with like real life stuff. I'm moving pretty soon in real life, moving across the country, so I'll be gone 1,500 miles from my current house. And I got a lot of other things going on as part of that moving process with my job and all those things. So I've been delayed in making new content. I've been meaning to do some of these episodes for a long time, but today's episode is to talk about the sort of tail end of Planes of Power on Teek, and then also to talk about the launch of Gates of Discord, which was our most recent expansion launch that happened here. So Pop went, I guess, how we expected, how anyone would expect. Planes of Power with the Mischief rule set is kind of a weird one. There's the normal Pop progression that you have to do, and I think I did an episode where I talked about the launch, so we know how all that went. We crushed the launch, dominated. I think Kanos Yacht Club got second or third, and RI got second or third. I forget who was on top there. RI might have squeaked in with the number 2 placement there, and QIC might have got third, if I recall correctly. But anyway, both a little bit behind Faceless there. So the loot tiers on Planes of Power are way out of whack. There's a bunch of mini bosses in Soul Row Tower, in Plane of Water, and in Plane of Fire that can be basically done with sometimes as little as 6 people, usually easily with 18 people, or I should say 18 characters. Quite easy, and they drop Quorum loot, like literally tier 1 raid drops. It also means that killing Quorum will sometimes net you absolute garbage from Plane of Fire minis. So, there's pros and cons. You can mass split some of this content and really farm tier 1 stuff really easily. And then it spawns, like every 48 hours or 24 hours or so, depending on the mob in open world. So as far as open world goes, I think RI got across the 4-month expansion, I would say RI probably got like less than 10 mobs. I don't think that they had any coordinated or organized real attempt to get any of them, and of those 10, I think like 3 were Plane of Water that they did while we were in Plane of Time, the first Plane of Time, because all the open world stuff on our Pop launch was not spawned when the servers came up, so it popped later on after we had blitzed through the EPs and DZs and all that. Anyway, normal stuff, right? RI sucks. They have I think you can officially say that they have become their final form, which is the RMT Boxer Guild that we always said they would be. Now it's just their whoever their leader is now, with a bunch of people who are leftovers and a few people from Greed is Good era of Mischief, and they all just they box like 6 to 20 characters and do their own little small man things. So not much accomplished there. Eldon came out, not really notable, and then GOD was coming up. I knew going into GOD that it was going to be my last expansion on Teek, which, oh yeah, spoiler alert, if you guys didn't know, I turned over with one of our members named Doomsday. He's a good guy coming back from Mischief, so he's been with us for a couple years now, and I think he'll do pretty well with the job, obviously, since, I chose him. But I was like, okay, GOD launch is going to be kind of my finale. I'm going to wrap up GOD launch, and win or lose, we'll turn over after that. So we had GOD coming up. I knew QYC was our big, I don't want to call him threat. Like QYC, I would call like a friendly rival for us. We get along, me and Rat, their guild leader. I would call us sort of friends within the EQ sphere. And QYC, I think all the way back to Kunark, has been a really good example of like what you can do as 2 guilds that compete but are friendly and are on good terms. So I have a lot of respect for those guys, but I knew that they were going to be a threat because they finished Lucklin incredibly fast. They were the second guild to beat Lucklin. They were pretty competitive on their time with Pop, and I knew they were going to be testing for GOD. They did GOD on the Yellowknack server, and they only lost it by like 20 minutes. So they're a fast guild. They know how to test. They take it seriously, all that stuff. And they had absorbed, I think, some smaller guilds throughout Planes of Power. So they were strong. They were going in with a strong roster. We had a lot of attrition, which is pretty typical of Planes of Power, but still went in really powerful. So we do our thing. We tell people, hey, form your own groups and go test tipped, and we'll give you bonus DKP. We did some test runs. I went in with time benchmarks on our test nights and said, okay, like we did every single raid, Ikins 1 through 3, Ikins 4, Inktuda, Tixivu, and then TACV. We did all of that on test. We didn't do Sino, I don't think, because I don't know why. We just didn't do Sino on test. But we did all the rest of the progression stuff on test. And I had specific time marks that we were aiming for, and we pretty much beat all of those time marks, I think, except for our Inktuda, which was slow, and that was probably my fault because I was like rusty on Inktuda. But then launch day came, and our plan was that since everyone had those Magus tokens that you get from Vaniki, you could just port right to Natimbi as soon as the server launches. And we know how server launches go, or expansion launches go, right? Like we've seen the issues that you have with lag and all that. So we had spread our people out all across a bunch of different zones. And we were just like, hey, when it goes live, just port with your group and get out of here, right? So we pre-buffed and all that, and everyone just ran and did their tipped runs. And we were aiming for sub 15 minutes. Most of our groups got that, and we said, hey, basically, like we're gonna do 3 raids, and we're just gonna take groups, no matter what their composition or who's in them. They're just gonna come in the order that they finished tipped. So that was your incentive. If you wanted to be like the server first racing team, you would have a really fast tipped, and you would practice a lot. I think my group was like the third group done with tip this time. So not the like cutting edge, but pretty fast. Third in our guild, by the way. When I zoned into code tasks with my group, which I suppose I should explain in case anyone doesn't know, the way GOD progression works is you have to do this zone called tipped. It's a 6-man group instance. It normally takes like, around about a half hour if you're doing it casually and you haven't practiced. And then as soon as you're done with that, you have access to code tasks, which is where the real raid progression piece starts to begin. So the first thing anyone has to do is tipped. Now, we blasted in there real fast. I want to say like 12 minutes for us to do tipped and get into Kotaz, and 2 groups beat us. One of our groups was done in 10 minutes. That was our fastest one, which is also like the fastest tipped I've ever seen outside of test. We've had some people get like 9:45s on test, but that's, all the luck in the world because there's some RNG on how fast your tipped could be. But it's funny, man, when our first group zoned in, they sent me a teller like, hey, there's already like 2 groups in Kotaz. I'm like, what guild? And it was just like actually I think it was just like a 24 boxer fell with command or something, some like RMT box crew. I'm just going to guess that they warped through tipped. They just zoned in, warped to the end, killed the boss and zoned out, which is why they were so fast. Maybe I'm just being a spoiled sport here, but it just strikes me as unlikely that a random guy boxing like 12 plus characters is going to be faster with multiple of his groups than 6 humans who practiced quite a bit. It's possible, absolutely possible, but doubt. Anyway, we jump in, we start doing all of our progression, we knock out Ukwa. As we're finishing Ukwa, QIC is zoning into Ukwa, and RI, I think, has begun their Ikins 1 through 3. We had it set up so that like raids 2 and 3 were starting Ikins 1 through 3 with our requester group while we did Ukwa, and our requester group would be our just piggies. They would be 6 piggies. So more or less the way it works is like you have to do Ukwa and then Ikins 4 to get access to Inktuda and Quivik. But Ikins 1 through 3, totally optional. The only person who needs those is the requester for the raids so that he can request Ikins 4. So these other raids, we're going to push them through while we did that. Now, our requester group was like too slow for that to work, so we only did Ikins 1, I think, while we were in Ukwa. And then the main raid, the first raid, got out of Ukwa, just did Ikins 2, 3, and 4 with the requester group and blitzed through the rest. But our guy who requested Ikins 4 was able to, you do this little trick where you put 55 people in your raid, and the requester, the person who has requester access, is the 55th person. He's not in a group. When you pop the DZ, he will not be pulled into the DZ. He won't get a lockout or a replay timer or anything. So he pops it for raid 1, then he pops it for raid 2, then he pops it for raid 3. And then he just joins the raid 1 that he was stuck out of. In fact, I think we left him out so we could do backflagging later. But in any event, we blitz through Ikens 4 and raid 1 then goes to Inktuda. Raids 2 and 3 go do their Ukwa because they hadn't done Ukwa yet. We blast through Inktuda, get into Teksivu. I think as we're getting into Teksivu, other guilds are still, no one else is getting into Quivik yet, so they're like an hour or two behind us at this point. QYC, I think they had some issues. They all formed up at the portal merchants in Freeport, and they were having all kinds of lag and stuff out there. To be honest, I don't know why you would go to the portal merchant. I mean, I guess there's like the idea that that you can get a port that takes you to like Kinemi. It takes you like 2 zones ahead on the race to get to Tipped. So you have fewer zone lines if you think the zone lines generally are going to suck and be slow. But it requires you to have a bunch of wizards and druids, which either you're like adding them to groups, which is slow, or they're just in your raid, which is probably suboptimal. You know what I mean? Because they're not the tip-top DPS classes or the best healers, you know what I mean? So we just went with our Magus tokens. We, knew they would work, 100% reliable, wouldn't have to wait on the vendor, maybe not spawning, wouldn't have to deal with zone lag, and we would have a more optimal raid composition. So that's what we went with. So I think that held QIC back by like a whole hour, the amount of lag. Like one of their guys described it, he said that they were stuck in Freeport, they couldn't zone out. Then when they finally got out, they ported to Kinemi, and then they crashed before they got to Tipped. And when they logged back in, they were back in Freeport, and all their gear was gone, or it had been like unequipped, and they had to like equip every piece again. So they were having a lot of issues. And RI spent like all that time still in the Ikens 1 through 4. Like while we were in Teksivu, I hit up one of their guys and I was like, hey, so where are you guys at in prog right now? Or like, because when you who all a guild, it shows like a trial of glorification or whatever, but that could be Ikens like 1 through 4. You don't know which one because they all have the same zone short name. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to give you, it's secret information. I can't give you that information because we're racing. And I was like, dog, we are not racing. Like we're fighting Zun right now, about to be done with this in like 40 minutes. We're not racing. He was like, oh, okay. So around the time that we were in Teksivu, wrapping up Teksivu, getting into Takvi with our first raid, QIC was getting into Inktuda. And this was when, we had a pretty good idea that we knew we were going to win at this point. Like, you're not going to mess up Takvi. It's pretty cut and dry. And we knew furthermore that our raid 2 and 3 had a good chance of finishing before anybody else too. So we had kind of had a conversation before launch, almost jokingly, like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we did what we called a podium sweep? Like the first, second, and third place clears of GOD were faceless. All just our 3 raid splits beat everybody. And that ended up being what happened. It sucked we didn't get all 3 like yellow texts near each other, because like the raid 1 finished like 45 minutes ahead of raid 3. Raid 2 was in the middle there, and then someone got like a Nakwafel kill from Inktuda right in between our second and our third 2 nat kills. So it would have been nice to have like just like one wall of yellow text with all 3 of them. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty hype, and GOD is one of my favorite expansion launches. I didn't go super hard with planning it out like I did on Mischief, because I wasn't as nervous. But on the day of, I wished I had been a little bit more thorough. I let people like form all their own stuff and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it went as well as it possibly could have. All 3 of our groups beat the fastest GOD clear times ever, which is a little bit helped by Mischief rule sets, I think. Maybe not. I don't know. Thinking back, I don't know that Mischief helps. So on Mischief, we had an idea that you could run Ikens 1 through 3 and just trade the final items to the raid requester, so you could do them in tandem simultaneously, and that would save you like a half hour. And we did it, and it bugged out on us, so we didn't do it on this one. I don't know if it was like an issue with the hails, because there's a kind of a weird hail sequence and series of turn-ins you have to do throughout the process. It could have been something we messed up there, or it could have been something with an invisible flag where the raid requester has to do Ikens 1 through 3 and have the items from Ikens 1 through 3. You know what I mean? We didn't know, and it was kind of a pain to test and figure that out. So we never really figured it out, and we went with the safe route of not cucking ourselves, and we just did them the normal way. I think that's the only place that the Verona Vi Mischief rule set really saves you any time. Yeah, pretty much. So that was our launch, man. It was easy. You know, GOD raids are not super hard like they used to be, especially with glyphs and the level of gearing that we had. And you know, you do it on test and you knock out all the cobwebs, and it just was super buttery smooth. So couldn't have been happier. And then you know, what we saw at the end of Pop was just like big RMT boxers, guys who are boxing like 20 characters, start camping. They've begun to move into open world, and they'll just what's that one guy's name? Crystor, Cuckstor, Jerkstor. Jerkstor is one of these open world guys. Like, he just like would go into Soul Row Tower and pick like one mini and just sit on its spawn. He would just not move for days. You're like, okay, I mean, like, if that's how you want to spend your time, I guess. Whatever, we would just not get that mob, or sometimes we would get that mob despite that. But that happened, like, you know, that took weeks for that process to begin and pop. And we saw, what was it, Keyboard Turner's 54 boxer. He started moving in to try to do Quivik and Texivu open world stuff on GOD like literally day one. So it's a shame that EverQuest has kind of become that, you know what I mean? Not what you want to see, but it is the reality that the biggest competition that you see on a TLP server, if you're an open world guild, is usually going to be just some guy who's trying to sell loot to pay for chicken tenders, and he's boxing 54 characters with MacroQuest. And if you report him, the GMs just will not do anything about it. They'll be super ineffective. They'll come suspend like one character or something. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's a shame. I don't even care, you know, about people using MQ2 for the most part. I've like become numb to the idea of it. I don't like warp specifically, and I don't like the idea like that people are mass boxing. Those things are kind of distasteful to me. But the proliferation of the software, there's just nothing you could do about it. The staff at DarkPod they don't have the numbers or the time to combat the level of dedication that the cheaters have, and so the game has just sort of become that, right? But yeah, that was it. And then I, you know, held on for a few days to the guild and just tidied up some GOD launch stuff. We did a back flag raid, made sure everyone was good. But the best part of that, you know, other than the podium thing and the fastest ever, those are all great. But the best part was that every single person who got to play and launch got to be basically part of the server first team. They all got to push. There was no one who's left out. There was no one who was stuck funneling things to a master group of speedsters. You know what I mean? Everybody who logged in and got through tipped, which was your personal responsibility, and you know, didn't crash or whatever, got to participate all the way through and do the whole thing together. So that was really great. And the order of operations just came down to like which raids were faster and which raids got done with tipped first. So I had a lot of fun. Plus, I got to raid with Seeger, which was always a treat to raid with him. He's one of the funnier guys to raid with. He's good in comms and everything like that. And unfortunately, even though we've been guilded for like years and years across all these other branches of Faceless and this one, Seeger and I never really get to raid together unless it's an expansion launch or something, because we're both leading our own splits normally, which totally sucks. Yeah, I mean, I love raiding with some of my best friends in EQ end up being officers, and I can't play the game with them anymore. You know what I mean? Once they're officers, because they have their own responsibilities they got to take care of for the guild. So we all end up being super good friends, and then we're always all in different splits. So we're like Discord friends who help manage the same, you know, guild, but we're in different departments, it feels like. But yeah, that was our GOD launch. So definitely a 10 out of 10 experience for me, and one that I'm happy to step away from Teek on. Now, we also have this new server that got announced, I think, like the week after our GOD launch, right? I don't think we know the name of the server yet, but it's sort of like a Vaniki Oakwind hybrid. It's got first to engage, which is what we expected, right? We were saying for a while that we think FTE is coming back, and I think that's a good thing. Seeing how things rolled out on the server, you know, I think overall it was a healthy thing for Oakwind. The players that stuck around seemed like they like it once all the crying and drama was gone. About it, you know, so glad to see that they're bringing FTE back. I'll miss the DPS races, right? Because on Teek we had incredible DPS races in Kunark and Velius and a few in Lucklin, which are some of my peak EQ memories ever now, like having 72 wizards versus 72 wizards and just doing that every single day. There's really nothing like it. But first to engage will have its own meta, no doubt. But this server is kind of weird. So they're getting the EXP bonus, the heirloom EXP bonus thing that Oakwind had, where like the more characters you have at max level, you get a 10% EXP bonus for each one. Hopefully it applies to AA out of the gate this time. And it's launching with Lucklin, which I think is absolutely the greatest. Lucklin launched TLP servers. There's nothing that has ever been as fun for a launch as Cello, right? Doing Emp with like no gear, doing all that stuff was incredibly fun. Having access to the Lucklin zones and Beast Lords right out the gate, amazing. But I think the server is not going to be a big one based on like talking to my friends and everything. Now the reason is because it's launching at level 50 as the cap, which I think is great, but they're not going to raise the level 50 cap and they're not going to open new expansions for 6 months, which is pretty much a death sentence. No one's going to want to do that. No one wants to be level 50 for 6 months. No one wants to be stuck in Lucklin for 6 months. Just not a good policy, I think. I want to play on the server. I want to do it. I firmly believe that even at level 50, you could beat all the content up through Lucklin. Very challenging, but possible. However, it just seems like a few tiny little things miss the mark here. First, if we're going to have that level 50 cap, what are you doing with casters? Because casters can't land anything on these raid mobs for the most part, right? So are you going to put Vaniki resists in? I think the intent is not to use the Vaniki resist system unless people make a big uproar about it. And no one's going to make an uproar about it because no one cares about the server enough to cry. So that means that at max level for the first 6 months, casters are pretty much going to be useless, even though focus effects are like one of the hallmarks of Lucklin on TLP. They're just not going to matter at all. I guess for healers, they'll matter a little bit, but I mean, like you're just CH rotting everything anyway. And you're level 50 and you're in Lucklin, which means you can't get any AA because you need to be at least 51 to get AA. So you would really want this server to have a modified resist system. You'd want it to have a modified gear system, level requirement system, right? Because there's a bunch of Lucklin gear that you literally can't put on your characters. There's Velius gear that requires level 60 or 55, I think. And for 6 months, this gear can't be worn, which is stupid. Like if you can earn the gear, you should be able to use the gear. So they should probably just get rid of level requirements for the gear in those eras, period, because it's not that game breaking. And then we talked about the spell situation, the gear situation. Oh, and the AA. I mean, you need to either launch at like level 51 cap or ideally 55 cap, or you need to reduce the requirement on AAs for levels, because being in Lucklin for 6 months and not being able to work on alternate advancement is just crazy. And it's like if you launched Kunark without the XR. You know what I mean? Like it's like one of the big pieces, a lot of the big pieces of Lucklin just are walled off. And I think I mean it just it sucks. They're gonna look at this and they're gonna see it fail. And I worry that Darkpaw is going to get the wrong idea about why it failed. And Darkpaw, if any of you guys are watching, don't get the wrong idea. A Lucklin launch isn't a recipe for failure. I think a Velius launch will give you a better success. Even though I prefer a Lucklin launch, I think Velius launch will get you a better launch population, because there is a portion of like the P99 style player base that won't play Lucklin and they'll just not start because they're stupid. But so many new things are added in this server that if it succeeds or if it fails, which it's probably going to fail, they're not going to be able to pinpoint what was the critical issue or the critical key to success. You know what I mean? And that's what I worry about, is that they'll blame the wrong thing. Lucklin launch is not going to be the reason it fails. Even the level 50 launch is not going to be the reason it fails. 6 months at level 50, 6 months in Lucklin, those two things will be the reason it fails. Those undoubtedly will be the critical thing. It would be better if it launched at, like, you could even launch it. First, we get too complicated. EverQuest players are like, we tend to be old and we're set in our ways. We don't like new things. Otherwise, we wouldn't be playing EverQuest. So you got to drip feed new stuff. Can't be too many new things all at once. Otherwise, it scares people. They want to kill Nagafin. You know what I mean? I would almost say, like, if you want to launch at 50, that's great. And then, like, every 4 weeks, add a block of levels. Like 4 weeks later, you can go up to 53. 4 weeks later, 55, and just see what guilds could do at those level locks. And the other problem is just like, these are really cool ideas, but man, do they suffer because of EverQuest game designing raid content around defensive, which is a terrible, terrible broken ability. For if someone has been living under a rock, if you somehow are watching this podcast and you don't know how defensive works, it's not exactly like this, but you basically take half damage. Basically, for a period of time, a warrior, specifically and only a warrior, can use defensive to take half damage from a raid mob. And it's such a powerful ability, which they get at level 55, that all subsequent tier 1 raid content is tuned around defensive tanks. So, like Avatar of War, Emsra, Vulak, Tunair, King Tormax, even like Vindy and Kale. You know what I mean? Doing these without defensive tanks is incredibly difficult. I wouldn't say impossible. It's incredibly difficult, and it is an incredibly inconsistent experience because a perfect round from these mobs will kill a non-defensive tank. At level 60, it'll kill a non-defensive tank. So that would mean you would need like a 1 second CH rot rolling to probably not die on a level 60 tank with not having defensive. A 50 tank, these mobs absolutely will frequently one round the tank. Even like close to their minimum rolls will frequently kill tanks in one hit. So it's really a problem of defensive. I don't know what the easy answer is. I mean, get lower defensive to 51 and launch the server with 51 as the cap, and it would fix like 80% of the issue. A lot more people would play, and the game would not be any different or really easier than it is now, right? Because like, you still would never have a classic launch with defensive, and you get defensive before you do any raid mobs in Kunark anyway. So just make defensive at level 51. Not even just for this server, but across the whole game. Screw it. You know what I mean? It would affect such a small number of things and probably would just be a net positive. But right now, the server is going to launch and it's going to be a train wreck. No one's going to play it. I don't know if there's any guilds advertising for it. It's just not going to be good. And EverQuest is facing more competition now than they ever have before. They've got Pantheon, which is in a workable state, has thousands of players playing it. It's got Monsters and Memories launching in January. It's got whatever the game that Evercraft Online used to be launching soon. All these games are coming up, and they are taking a chunk out of the same core audience. And you've got the server which shall not be named, the Hero's Journey, and Project Quorum, and P99. All these opportunities for EverQuest players to play in either very classic or very creative or novel in new ways. You know what I mean? They're all out there. And Darkpaw really just can't. I would think they cannot afford to keep missing the mark. And it's a shame because they only swing at this once a year. And they really need someone who's got their finger on the pulse, I think, and can provide input on these sorts of things. Like maybe they should use the Community Resource Council. But I feel like most of the CRC is just live players who will like intentionally sabotage TLP servers to make them suck so that less live players leave, or they will just give bad ideas because they're bad, all those sorts of things. You need like a TLP CRC, but I just don't know that there's enough will to do it. The hype in EverQuest, especially in the TLP community, but I think broadly speaking, is as low as it's ever been. You know what I mean? It just, at the end of the day, it's who cares? You know what I mean? There's big rivalries have all been settled. Everyone knows where everyone stands on everything. All the content has been beaten down and figured out to the most exact science. It's all too easy. You know what I mean? In 2011, 2007, when those TLPs were coming out, when the progression servers were coming out, they didn't come out every year. So you had brain drain, you had institutional knowledge, which was lost, and guilds were less likely to just reform wholesale because they had time to drift apart and things happened. Things changed in the game, all that stuff. People didn't come back. Critical people moved on with their lives. But with the 12-month schedule, guilds more and more are just staying together. It used to be hardcore guilds only. Now it's a lot of medium core guilds. The same guilds are coming on multiple servers. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's good that you could just import a whole community, but it does make the communities feel less authentic. The server community, right? Like when everyone's already locked in, there's no new feeling there, right? It's like, oh, look, it's the same 10 guilds are here as last time. You know what I mean? And they have the same leadership, and they're getting pretty good at things, both as raiders and as guilds. They got, they've all got a system that they kind of have figured out. Things are stable, and stability is not good for hype. Things are too stable, too peaceful. Everyone knows the way things are going to go, and they're rarely ever wrong. We need a shakeup. We need hype. We need like new guilds, fresh blood. We need the same big guilds to stop rolling. Like we need Faceless to stop being on every TLP, or RI to stop being on every TLP. And we need every TLP to not be every 12 months. You know what I mean? I think like not best thing for Darkpaw's wallet or their quarterly earnings ratios and all that, but the best thing for the TLP community would be like if we just didn't get a server for 3 years. I think that would be really good to build up hype. Tormax we saw was a big failure. So the appetite for like the vanilla experience is relatively low. People are going to say, well, that's only because it launched next to Teek. Well, yeah, I mean, like, if you could launch server A or server B and you know which one is going to be more popular, why would you launch the less popular one, right? That's what I'm getting at. Like, I don't know, we got to find a new path forward as a community, and hopefully the studio figures out some things. I think looking for that more novel approach, that new way to play TLPs, what they're doing is correct. But it's just a tough spot for them to be in because they only get one chance to iterate on this per year because of their schedule. And there is, this feeling that when they make a new server, they gotta support it for like the 12 years it takes to reach live now. And do you add one small change that barely makes it different, or do you add 10 changes? And then if it fails or succeeds, you don't even know why. It's a tough spot. Whereas emulators are getting better and better, and they can launch like every freaking 3 weeks. They got crazy new ideas, and you play them for a couple months, and boom, the next one's out, and you keep going. So, yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. I don't envy them, and I think M&M and Pantheon and EverQuest or Edge of what was it? I can't say the name. The game that used to be EverQuest Online. These are all going to steal little chunks of that EverQuest player base, especially the EverQuest TLP player base. So we'll see what happens in the future. But, this is, I guess this is a wrap for this episode. Zaide out, wishing you all the best and wishing EverQuest nothing but the best. Peace.